So the June council meeting is a little bit more than a month away, which means it's time to give everyone a little bit of an update, or a little bit of a summary rather, of what's on the agenda this month that's of interest to everyone. So as always, the planning and development stuff comes up first. To begin with, there's a lot of stuff that's technical and sort of administrative day-to-day things. Changing to a building envelope of a place down in Golden Bay, proposed street names for a new development near Kerosene Lane in Baldivis, little things like that. But the big one that comes out of that's something I've been talking about and a lot of other councillors have as well, is the proposed small bar, restaurant and microbrewery in Safety Bay. Now, it's something I've spoken about a fair bit on social media, and generally the response has been really, really positive. The city itself conducted some public consultation and sent out letters to 285 residents that live nearby. 144 responses came back, and 123 of those were in favour, which is, is a pretty substantial majority. There are a small number of people who live really close to the proposed facility there on Safety Bay Road who are against it and say that it's going to cause issues with regards to noise and drunken disorderly behaviour and that type of thing. But the proposal meets all the requirements in terms of the traffic management plan, the waste management plan, sound control, all those types of things. So I think it's probably going to get the go-ahead, which I know will probably upset a small number of people, but I think the vast majority will be quite happy with that. From Planning and Development Services is a joint development assessment panel application for a new service station on Dixon Road, which this one is proposed to be a BP. Plan is to put it in between the 7-Eleven and the caravan park there on the eastern end of Dixon Road. I know a lot of people will say it's another service station, we've already got plenty of them, but that sort of commercial side of things isn't really something that the city can take into consideration. Again, it ticks all the boxes, and the only thing I can say is hopefully more petrol stations will increase the level of competition and maybe bring down the petrol prices, but we can live in hope. Our engineering and park services guys have done a bit of a study of a number of parks all throughout Rockingham, all the way down to Secret Harbour, Golden Bay and Singleton, looking at areas where we could maybe put in a few more enclosed dog parks, areas where there's a fence all the way around and you can let your dog off the lead. They've narrowed it down to two recommendations, St Clair Reserve in Port Kennedy and Sea Haven Reserve in Waikiki. Now, this is coming up for council consideration, obviously, next week. If it gets the go-ahead, and I don't really see why it wouldn't, all that's going to happen is it's going to go out for public consultation. All the residents who live in the immediate vicinity will be notified and have their chance to have their say, and it will go up on the website, and as always, I'll make sure everyone is aware of it so that everyone gets the opportunity to contribute to the decision. All right, I've kind of rushed through the planning and engineering side of things because there is a lot of other interesting stuff there, but I really wanted to focus more on the corporate and community development side of things this month because there's two items there that are going to be pretty contentious. The first one being setting the budget for the next 12 months, which includes setting the rates, and the other one is about the petition to change the method by which the position of mayor is filled. So bear with me, these are both complicated topics, and I want to really have this conversation properly. So please bear with me for the next couple of minutes, and we'll dive right in. All right, so let's talk about the issue of the annual budget, and probably most importantly for everyone watching, the rate increase. Now, rate increases are never popular, and we do cop a lot of flack because the City of Rockingham's are a little bit higher than our neighbours, but this is where it's important to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. True, the City of Rockingham's proposed rate rise is higher than that of our three neighbours, the City of Kwinana, the City of Mandurah and the Shire of Serpentine-Jarrahdale, but the actual rates you pay are lower in Rockingham than they are in our neighbours. So it's a bit like a bigger increase to a smaller pie. That's what's being proposed. So why is an increase needed at all? Well, first up, the city, just like everybody else, has bills to pay and they keep going up. Things like our power bill for keeping on the streetlights and everything. The city pays for that. That money goes to Western Power and whatnot, and those costs, just like everything else, go up. The other side of things is that people are generally constantly expecting more and more from the city. Everybody wants more skate parks, more boat ramps, more enclosed dog parks. The Baldivis sporting field, which is required because the population of Baldivis is huge, and they need the facilities, and there's nothing there really, not yet anyway, there will be soon, to support those sports clubs and that type of thing. So it is constantly a balancing act between people asking for more from their local government and finding a way to pay for it. So it's definitely not an easy subject, and as I always stress, all of the information that goes up to council, all of the stuff that we use to make our decisions is all available publicly. So I've got the draft annual budget, all 180 up to 178 pages of it. That's available online. The monthly expenditure of every individual transaction that the city does is all available online. Now I spend probably more time than I should trying to go through it all and trying to understand it, and I get a lot of advice from the professionals both here at the city and at the department. But I know a lot of people watching this are accountants and bookkeepers and all that type of thing. So as I always stress, if you're interested and you want to have a look, please do so. I'll show you how to find the info. It's all online. And if there's bits that don't make sense to you, things that you'd like to be clarified, things that you might see that I don't because I'm not an accountant, come to me with those things. We'll get them answered, and we'll find out why things are the way they are. The city does an amazing job in balancing what is already a really efficient and streamlined budget. Our ratio of staff members to residents is one of the best in WA. And when it comes to the cost of rates for an equally valued property, if you got all the 30-something local councils in the metro area and they listed them from number 1 as the most expensive to number 30 being the cheapest, the city of Rockingham comes in at 21. Now, it would be great to be the cheapest, but overall, I do think the city does an amazing job. But that said, if you feel otherwise, and you want to call me on that, give me a call, email me, contact me through Facebook. We can do it over the phone, we can arrange a time to meet in person, because, it is important. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to speak about in this video, and if you've made it this far, because I understand we're up to about 7 or 8 minutes, please bear with me for just an extra couple, because the last one is a bit of a biggie. It's the petition to change the way that the mayor is elected. Now, the way things are at the moment, every 2 years, half the council is up for re-election, and once those councillors are appointed, they collectively make the decision as to who is going to be the mayor and lead the council. What the petitioner wants to see is the change so that every 2 years, half the council are up for election, but in addition to that, the position of mayor will be a separate election that runs at the same time, and the mayor gets to be elected for a term of 4 years, elected by the people of Rockingham and not the councillors. Now, 3 years ago, before I joined council, if somebody had asked me to sign that petition and asked me if I felt the people of the city of Rockingham should have the right to choose their own mayor, I'd have been all over it. Of course I'll sign that petition. Why wouldn't I? Why shouldn't the people of Rockingham get the chance to choose their own mayor? But nearly 2 years ago, I joined council, and in that time, I've been putting in about 30 hours a week. I've just about finished the diploma of local government, and last month I passed my 500th meeting. And in that time, I've learned a great deal about the difference between the public perception of what it means to be on council and what it actually is under the control of the Local Government Act, which is state legislation, and that sets out the rules that we have to play by. Now, there are probably more differences than there are similarities between councillors and members of state and federal parliament. Those guys are free to say what they want. If they don't agree with the decision the Premier's made, the government's made, they're free to criticise the Premier or the Prime Minister, and they can blame them for every problem under the sun and say it's all their fault. Councillors aren't given that freedom. Under the Local Government Act, if I don't agree with a decision that the council has made, I'm not allowed to criticise it publicly. I mean, behind closed doors, certainly, in the council meetings, of course, but publicly, the council are required by state legislation to have a united front. Now, the other big difference is I often get phone calls from people who think that as a councillor, I'm allowed to pick up the phone and speak to the rangers or the planning department or anybody else at the city and say, I want this to happen, make it happen. When in actual fact, that's just not the way it works. I don't have that authority, and neither does the mayor. The only authority council has is when we as a collective make a decision during the council meetings. Now, the mayor's no different. The mayor is elected basically to fill three roles. The first one is to chair the monthly council meeting. The second one is in the unlikely event of a tied vote, they get a second vote. Now that's already a rarity, and by the end of the year when we go to 11 councillors instead of the 10 that we currently have, that'll become even rarer. And the third one is to act as the council's spokesperson. Now, there's plenty of decisions the council's made in the past 2 years that I don't agree with, but I'm not allowed to get on Facebook or whatever else and start criticising all the other councillors and say that was a terrible idea because blah, 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 blah. If I was to do that, I'd be found in breach of the Code of Conduct and I'd be sent to the Standards Panel. The same applies for the mayor. There's plenty of decisions the council have made in the last 2 years that I've been here where the mayor has voted for the complete opposite. But the council as a whole have made the decision, and he, as our spokesperson, has to stand up to them when the newspapers call and when people ask him, he has to say, this is what the council's decided, it was a good idea, and this is what we're doing. And that is basically the biggest reason why I'm against the idea of changing the way the mayor's elected. Because under the current Local Government Act, the mayor is my spokesperson. I'm not allowed to get up and say, this was a terrible idea. I have to rely on my spokesperson to, a lot of the time, speak on my behalf. You know, these videos that I do, as much as I enjoy them and I know that they're popular, I am technically skirting pretty close to being in breach of the Code of Conduct because I'm talking about, what the council's doing, but I don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the council. Only the mayor does. So I've got to be really careful just to talk about how this is my opinion. But it is pretty thin ice. So picture a situation where someone who's charismatic comes along and becomes a publicly elected mayor on the platform of, I'm going to do ABC. Now, they get elected, and the rest of the council have been around a lot longer, and they disagree with that idea. And they say, ABC is a terrible idea, we're going to go with XYZ instead, the complete opposite. Now, the mayor is required under the current state legislation to stand up and say, ABC was a terrible idea, we've gone with XYZ, and that's much better. Now, what's going to happen at that point is all the people that voted for them are going to complain that they're just like every other politician and they've gone back on their promises. So the mayor's not going to want to do that. But they're also not able to stand up and say, well, you voted for me because I want ABC, and all those councillors are all a bunch of idiots, and they voted for XYZ, and I don't agree with them. I'm on your side, they're all terrible, you've got to get rid of them. If the mayor was to do that, whether council elected or publicly elected, they'd be dragged in front of the Standards Panel because the CEO would be duty bound as part of his job to report them to the Standards Panel. They'd be found in breach, and we would run the risk of having a dysfunctioning council, and we'd all be dismissed by the local government minister. Now, if things were different, if the Local Government Act, which is under review at the moment, allowed councillors the freedom to criticise each other the way state and federal politics have, then it wouldn't be such a big issue. If I disagreed with a decision council made and was allowed to say, well, you voted for me because I believe in this, and council voted against it, then changing the way the mayor is elected wouldn't really be that big a deal. But under the current rules, I have to abide by the rules and allow the mayor to be the spokesperson. And because of that, I think it's important that the council have the right to choose who their spokesperson is. So the way I see it, there is one really big reason why we should change the way the office of mayor is filled. And that's because if we were to survey every single person in Rockingham, I would be surprised if anything less than 99% of people said, yes, I want the right to vote for that person myself. But I think there's a lot of reasons against it. And I also think that if every single person that was asked that question was sat down for half an hour first and explained the way the system works and the restrictions that are placed on local council that state and federal don't have, I also believe the vast majority of them, and the vast majority of people I've spoken to about this, would agree that for the purposes of having a well-functioning council, it's important that the council spokesperson represents the council as a whole. It would be, in my opinion, disastrous if we had a council that were in agreement, but a spokesperson who was completely against it. By allowing the council the freedom to choose their own spokesperson, because really that's all the mayor is, it reduces the risk. Now, I know it's entirely possible with a council-elected mayor that we can still have someone who's incredibly charismatic and someone who is not afraid to break the rules and criticise other councillors. But they'll end up in front of the standards panel. And that's what's happened at, in the last 15 to 20 years. The city of South Perth, the city of Canning, the city of Coburn, the city of Nedlands, the city of Vincent, the list goes on. There are a huge number of councils that have been in trouble with the local government minister because essentially we are a bit of a glorified local government, state government department. They have the authority, despite the fact we're democratically elected, they can step in and fire us all. And the way things are at the moment, they can't fire an individual councillor. So if one bad apple is causing enough trouble, every councillor on the team gets booted off. And that's the biggest part about why I feel so strongly that we need to keep things the way they are. Because it's one little check and balance that allows the council the chance to have a say in who their spokesperson is, who our spokesperson is. Because, again, that's really all the mayor's position is to act as the council's spokesperson. Now, if you feel really strongly about this and you want to talk about it, I make a big song and dance about being easily contactable through Facebook and my email address and mobile phone. Feel free to give me a call or an email. We can talk about it over the phone, or we can even meet in person and sit down and have a coffee. Because if there's something you think I've missed, then, I want to hear it. I'll be honest. The hardest part of this job is finding that balance between what's popular and what's right. And I think, based on and I know 2 years isn't that long, but I really have jumped in with both feet and given everything to this role. I honestly think this is a case where what's popular and what's right aren't necessarily the same thing. But as always, I'm open to criticism. So if you disagree, give me a call. I look forward to it. So that's this summary for the month of June. I hope to see you at the council meeting on Tuesday night. It starts at 6. If you want to ask questions, make sure you get there a little bit early. Make sure you let our Manager of Governance, Mr. Peter Varys, know that you'd like to ask a question. Ideally, if you email them in ahead of time, it gives the city officers a chance to provide a response, so you'll get an answer on the night. Otherwise, a lot of the time, especially if it's technical or complicated, the mayor will say, well, we'll take that on notice and we'll get an official response to you, and you have to wait and get it in writing. You will get it, you just won't get it on the night. So 6 o'clock, council buildings, Tuesday of next week, and I hope to see you there. In the meantime, feel free to give me a call. Have a good night.